Next slide, please. Once again, we would like to extend a warm welcome to today's session on Study Pyramid. We are excited to have you all here and look forward to sharing information with you. Our goal is to help you better understand the process, requirement, and any recent changes related to Study Pyramid. Additionally, we will also be answering your question during the Q&A session. Next slide, please. My name is Jitender, and I'm International Student Advisor, Immigration Specialist at Simon Fraser University. I will be your presenter today, and it is my great pleasure to be joined by Mei-Ling, who is the Manager of Immigration Services. Mei-Ling will be moderating our Q&A session today. Next slide, please. Before moving to the agenda, I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that SFU is located on unceded Coast Salish territory, the traditional territories of Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Coquitlam, and Cadzi Nation. If you would like to learn more about the history of First Nation and land acknowledgement, we would share some link toward the end of the presentation. I would also like to draw your attention to the bottom part of each slide. Particularly, immigration policy can change rapidly and without notice. Therefore, the information that we share today is current as of today, which is February 28, 2025. Thank you. In today's session, we will go over some important updates from IRCC that could affect study permit application. After that, we will dive into some of the frequently asked questions that were submitted during the registration process. Then we will open up for live Q&A. At ISS, or International Service for Students, we offer a range of services to help support your transition to SFU as an international student. You can see a list of services and support we offer to SFU students on the slide. As International Student Advisor, we provide non-academic advising and information about your temporary immigration status in Canada. That include your study permit, work eligibility, post-graduation work permit, etc. In addition, our team can also offer advice on medical insurance and navigating the Canadian healthcare system. Next slide, please. There are multiple ways you can connect with an ISA on all three SFU campuses and virtually. This includes both in-person and virtual booked and drop-in appointments, live chat, email, and phone. Our virtual and in-person services provide students with flexibility that they need to connect with us. Our website is also an excellent resource with instruction guide on how to apply for immigration document. We always recommend these self-guided resources as a first step to answering your questions. Next slide, please. On November 8, 2024, it was announced that IRCC will no longer accept study permit application through the SDS or Student Direct Stream and Nigeria Student Expense Program. The SDS option was available to certain countries and helped speed up processing time. Now that SDS has ended, all study permit application will need to be submitted as regular application. Next slide, please. Last year, also in November, IRCC announced that starting November 8, 2024, international students must be enrolled at the designated learning institute listed on their study permit. If they decide to switch school, they will need to apply for a new study permit for their new institution. For most students, this means that they will need a new study permit before beginning their program at SFU. Next slide. Back in January this year, IRCC introduced the requirement of provincial attestation letter for undergrad students. Then earlier this year, the criteria was expanded to include additional students as shown on the slide. Just a heads up that this is not a complete list. So if your situation is not covered here, feel free to get in touch with us separately. Next slide, please. Now, let's go over the specific scenario or situation where a PAL might be needed and where it might not. If you would like to share your answer, please raise your hand, but I'll just go through the scenarios like this. So, for example, if you are transferring to SFU from another post-secondary institute, such as FIC, you would need a PAL. If you are a new incoming student, undergrad or graduate, applying for study permit from outside of Canada, you will need a PAL or provincial attestation letter. If you are a high school student in Canada and will start your undergrad program at SFU, you will again need a PAL. In the unfortunate scenario, in case study permit was refused and you're planning to reapply, you would need a PAL. If you are a current student and extend your study permit for the same program and same level of studies, you don't need a PAL. If you are a work permit holder in Canada and will be applying for your study permit, again, you would need a PAL. In case you are an exchange student coming to SFU under a reciprocal agreement, for example, if you would be paying tuition fee directly to your home school, you don't need a PAL to apply for your study permit. Next slide, please. So, all right, that covers all the updates we wanted to go over today. Now let's move on to answering the question that you submitted during the registration process. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first question is, what is the best time to apply for a study permit? Next slide, please. So it's always a good idea to apply for your study permit as soon as you receive your offer letter from SFU. However, you will also want to keep processing time in mind. Be sure to check the processing time for the location where you would be applying for your study permit, as they can vary from location to location. So for example, as of February 28, 2025, the processing time from Vietnam and India is 15 weeks. Keep in mind, the processing time can change without any notice. Be sure to give yourself enough time for the application to be processed and plan ahead so you have enough time to make travel arrangements before your studies begin in Canada. Next question, please. So now let's tackle the second question and probably one of the most important questions. What documents do I need for my study permit application? The general document required for a study permit application include your offer letter from SFU, a copy of your passport, a recent photograph, proof of funds, and any document specific to your country. Depending on your situation, you may also need a provincial attestation letter or PAL. You may also need a medical examination depending upon where you would be applying for your study permit. It is also a good idea to include a study plan with your application, and we will go over the guidelines for that in the next slide. So I know that many of you are curious about financial documents, so don't worry, we have got that covered in a separate FAQ. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, we strongly encourage you to include a study plan or letter of intent so the immigration officer is satisfied about your primary purpose to enter Canada, which is to study and that you would be leaving Canada at the end of your authorized stay. Explain why you wish to study in Canada in your program for which you have been accepted. You may include things such as the quality of life in Canada, the high standard of education system, the benefit of being immersed in a multicultural society. What is your overall education goal? Why are you pursuing your education in Canada versus a similar program in your home country, which may be more reasonable? You may also want to explain how studying at SFU can help you academically, how it can build your career and grow as a person. Solid comparison between Canada and your country may strengthen your application as well. You may also state the advantage of you obtaining a degree in Canada and how that can open more opportunities for you in your home country. A study permit is a temporary resident application. You are expected to demonstrate your ties to your home country and that you have good reason to return after completing your study. You may talk about your family, assets, and properties or a job offer upon return. Some international students may be considering working or immigrating to Canada upon completing their program, while dual intent, which is basically as a study permit holder and a PR in future, is perfectly legitimate. It is not advisable to discuss in your study permit as your main objective is to study in Canada and achieve your education goal. It is important to note an immigration officer handles hundreds of applications and will only have few minutes to read your study plan and determine your eligibility. Therefore, we recommend that you keep it concise and summarize in one page if possible and 2 pages at maximum if needed. I hope that was good information that will help you writing your study plan. So now let's move on to next question. How long it will take to get my provisional attestation letter or PAL. I know many of you might be waiting for your PAL in order to submit your study permit application. So the process for getting a PAL is slightly different for undergrad student and graduate student. So for example, if you are an international undergrad student, the first step, you need to follow some steps, and after that you would be notified by admission department about your PAL. So for example, as a first step, you would need to confirm your personal information with SFU by logging to Go SFU account. Review your personal and contact information, ensure that is accurate and up to date. So for example, in case you're applying from outside of Canada, make sure that your address is correct. Update an official copy of your passport via Go SFU. Accept your offer of admission and pay your admission deposit by Go SFU. Now remember that you need to complete all of these steps in order for your PAL to be processed. If you complete all the above steps, you will be contacted by SFU with a response within 5 to 7 business days. In case any of those steps is not completed, you might not be contacted by SFU. So it is important that you look at these steps carefully and complete all of them. Similar to undergrad student, the same kind of step also apply to graduate student. And once you complete your complete those steps, you will be contacted by SFU again within 5 to 7 business days. Next slide, please. So I understand that some of you might have received a conditional offer letter and are probably wondering if you can apply for a study permit with that. So to determine if an unconditional offer is required, please refer to the visa instructions specific to your country. According to our experience, unconditional offer letters are not required in most countries. However, we understand that some countries require unconditional offer letter with a study permit application, which may delay the application process in case you continue to wait for that. If that is the case, we recommend proceeding with conditional offer letter and include a letter explaining how you plan to meet the condition. Should your study permit application still be pending when you receive or meet the condition and received an updated letter, you can submit the letter via the IRCC web form. Next slide, please. Many of you have submitted questions about financial documents, so let's discuss how you can prepare them. Next slide, please. When applying for your study permit, you will need to provide proof that you have enough funds to cover 1 year of tuition fee as indicated on your SFU offer letter, 1 year of living expenses, which is 20,635 Canadian dollar for a single person in 2024. This is subject to annual adjustment, though it has not been revised so far in 2025. And travel expenses for your journey to and from Canada. You only need to provide proof of funds for your first year, even if your program is longer. So for example, if you're an undergrad student, you don't need to show funds for all 4 years of education, but you should be able to demonstrate that you can fund your entire duration of study, which is 4 years. Next slide, please. When submitting your financial documents, keep these points in mind. If the funds are not in your name, include proof of access, like a signed letter from your parents if they are supporting you. It is also helpful to show your relationship with the sponsor. Again, in case your parents will be sponsoring you, you can include a birth certificate to show that they are your parents, right? The source and history of funds should be clear. For example, if you made large deposit recently, explain where it came from. The funds must be easily accessible. Proof of assets like property ownership is okay, but should not replace more accessible resources like bank account or employment. If you have funding from SFU, such as scholarship or TA, RA position, you can include it, but don't rely solely on that. Make sure you to show additional accessible financial support, such as bank account, etc., in support of your study permit application. Next slide, please. I plan to do co-op as a part of my program. How can I apply for the co-op work permit along with my study permit application? Next slide, please. So the co-op application process varies depending upon whether you are an undergrad student or graduate student. For most undergrad program at SFU, co-op is not mandatory. If you would like to participate in co-op or internship, the first step is to apply through the co-op program in your department, which is something you would be able to do once you have started your program at SFU. And once you're accepted into the co-op program, you would be able to apply for co-op program from within Canada. For graduate student, if co-op is required part of your program, you can apply for it when you submit your initial study permit application. Your offer letter will also indicate in case internship is mandatory part of your program. If co-op or internship are not mandatory, you will need to consult with your department. If they allow you to do an internship, you would be able to apply for co-op work permit from within Canada after you have started your program at SFU. Next slide, please. So next question that you would like to answer is, how can I apply for open work permit for my spouse or common law partner? So in March of last year, IRCC announced that only spouse of students in master, doctoral, or professional degree programs such as BE engineering would be eligible for spousal open work permit. Then earlier this year, it was updated again. Starting January 21st this year, the eligibility for a family open work permit will be more restricted. It will only apply to spouses of students enrolled in graduate programs such as master's and doctorate programs that are 16 months or longer, as well as certain professional programs. That basically means if you're an undergrad student, if your spouse or common law partner, they won't be eligible for the open work permit. Next slide, please. How can I initiate the process of letter of acceptance or LOA verification? So LOA verification was introduced by IRCC in 2024 as part of the requirement of designated learning institute, such as SFU, to verify document proving acceptance or enrollment for certain study permit application. Designated learning institutes such as SFU are now required to verify document for the following application: post-secondary application submitted from outside of Canada, post-secondary study permit application submitted from within Canada, including study permit extension. It is important to note that once you submit your application, IRCC will automatically send a verification request to SFU, and we will complete it within a specified timeline. Therefore, you don't have to initiate any action from your side. The only thing that you need to do is complete your application. It is important that you include the correct DLI number for SFU on your study permit. The DLI number for SFU is mentioned on the slide. Just remember that the first letter is O and not 0. Next slide, please. I know that as per the poll, most of you are still in the process of applying for your study permit. But in case some of you have applied, in case you're waiting for the process of your study permit application, sometimes it might get delayed. So what are your options if it is not approved on time? Next slide, please. So in case your study permit application get delayed, the first step is to check the processing time mentioned on the IRCTC website. Please note that the processing time does not include the time you may need to provide biometrics. If your application is considered complete and has exceeded the processing time mentioned on the IRCTC website, you may do following. Submit a web form and inquire about the status of your application. We would recommend that you include a letter of explanation stating why delay in a decision could impact your plan. In the unfortunate case your study permit is not approved in time for summer or fall 2025 intake, you may consider deferring your program to next available intake. The process to defer would be different for undergrad and graduate students. For undergrad students who would like to start the program in fall, deferral deadline would be updated soon. Graduate students should contact the department directly and ask about the process for deferral. The other option could be you may also want to check if it is possible to start program late. For undergrad students, we do not recommend missing more than 2 weeks of classes. Graduate students should contact the department directly. Please do know that this option does come with some risk. Study permit application approval is not guaranteed. In the event of refusal, you must consider the add and drop deadline if you choose this option after getting an approval. Next slide, please. So let's talk about traveling to Canada. So once a study permit is approved, can I travel to Canada with my study permit? Next slide, please. It is important to note the study permit is a document issued by Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada that allows you to study and stay in Canada temporarily. Just remember, a study permit is not a travel document. If your study permit application is approved outside of Canada, you will also receive a temporary resident visa or TRV or an electronic travel authorization depending upon your nationality, which allows you to enter Canada. US citizens, however, don't need a visa or ETA to enter Canada. Now, let's say if your study permit is approved, your visa is approved, you are ready to enter Canada, you might be wondering how soon you can enter Canada. So there is a specific time frame for you when you need to arrive before starting your studies. Just make sure you give yourself enough time to get prepared before your program begins. Also keep in mind that you're not allowed to work on and off campus until you officially begin your program at SFU in Canada. Next slide, please. Now, I understand that once you come to Canada, you might also want to work and gain some Canadian experience, right? So would your study permit allow you to work on and off campus? Next slide, please. So different type of work that you may pursue while you are a student at SFU. You may work on the SFU campus, off campus, and in SFU approved co-op internship practicum while you are with us. The requirements for each are different, and as you will see here on the enrollment, impact your eligibility to work on and off campus under your study permit. Students or international students, to be specific, are required to study full-time in the term they wish to work and meet IRCTC work-specific eligibility criteria as outlined on this slide in order to work on and off campus under your study permit. Off-campus work is restricted up to 24 hours per week during regular academic terms. However, eligible students may work full-time during a regularly scheduled break during their program. The designated regularly scheduled break at SFU are different again for undergrad graduate students. For undergrad international student, the reading week break between terms and the summer term may be considered regularly scheduled break for immigration purposes. For graduate student, the reading week break between terms are considered regularly scheduled breaks for immigration purposes. Some graduate program may have an academic break in the curriculum, which may also be considered a regularly scheduled break. But remember that not all programs have an academic break, and graduate students are required to study in each term, spring, summer, and fall. In order to be eligible to work full-time during a regularly scheduled break, student must hold full-time enrollment in academic term before and following the break, in addition to meeting the other criteria that are listed on the slide. If students are pursuing a SFA required and approved co-op, internship, or practicum, then this is a different kind of work that will be performed under a co-op work permit and not a study permit. Please note that for all these type of work on campus, off campus, co-op, you must also hold a valid social insurance number. Now, social insurance number is something you would be able to apply once you have arrived in Canada with your study permit. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are all the questions that we wanted to cover with today's presentation. Let's end the presentation with some tips for your study permit application. Submit your application as soon as you receive your offer letter from SFU to allow enough time for processing. Ensure you have all required documents, including your offer letter, passport, proof of funds, and country-specific documents, and that they are accurate and up-to-date. Show proof that you can cover your tuition, living expenses, and travel costs for at least the first year. Include a study plan outlining why you chose your program, why Canada, why SFU, and your future goals. Remember to use SFU correct DLI number in your application so that SFU can receive the request to verify your letter of acceptance. After your application submission, monitor your email for any additional requests from IRCC and respond promptly to avoid delays. Next slide, please. Stay updated on any changes to immigration regulation. Complete your biometric as soon as you receive the biometric instruction letter and ensure you have completed any required medical exam based on your country of residence. If you still have questions, refer to SFU frequently asked question or consult one of the international student advisor for personalized guidance. Next slide, please. We have also included some important links that might be helpful as you prepare your study permit application. Next slide. Additionally, I wanted to let you know that we would be organizing a follow-up session that one of my colleagues would be hosting on March 28th. Be sure to register for it in case you're interested in more questions about the study permit application. Next slide, please. So we'll now stop the recording. That was a lot of information, right?